Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. The first question for today comes from Edward, and it is, with the new night maps in Battlefield 4, do you think that DICE can add night vision goggles? It would replace one of your gadgets and can be toggled on or off. You would not believe how often I got this question. It was a little bit ridiculous, but clearly you guys like the idea of having infrared night vision goggles as one of the gadget slots in Battlefield 4. It only makes sense with the new night maps coming out. Why should I always be forced to aim down sight to get that Iron V effect if I'm using the infrared night vision scope? Not only that, but it also just gives us more options, or different options. Instead of having to use the red dot sight with the flashlight, I could use the red dot sight with the infrared night vision goggles, or better yet, a combo that we've never seen before, using a higher optic, like let's say the 8x scope if I'm using a bolt action rifle. That eliminates the need of having a higher optic bolt action rifle Iron V, but also something like the ACOG scope if I'm using an assault rifle. So many things would be solved if there was this gadget added, at least for the night version of the game. The tricky thing about it though, and something that we would have to work around, is making sure that it comes with some drawbacks. If everyone's using it, and it turns in just to a normal day version of Siege of Shanghai, but in a green hue, it just looks tinted green because everyone's using the Iron V, but everything is illuminated because of those goggles, then why even have a night version of the game to begin with? If everyone is using that gadget because it feels mandatory and doesn't have any weaknesses, then I think we run into some issues. Right now, really the only counter to it is the flare. It counters it severely. I mean, you look at a flare through one of these scopes and you are going to be blinded. You're going to have no idea if an enemy is around it. But I feel like if that's the only counter, we're going to run into the problem that I just laid out. What I'm envisioning and what I would love to see is that every light source, doesn't matter what it is, it could be a burning car or a few lights inside of a shop, they should have a moderate amount of a blinding effect. That way, depending on the combat situation that you're in, you're gonna have to make the decision to either turn it off or turn them back on. For example, if you are going into a bright section of the map, it might be a good idea to turn these off. You're gonna miss the guy who's in that dark alleyway. He's still gonna be able to kill you because you have no idea he's there, but that's the risk that you run. The good thing about it now is that you can see that there were a bunch of enemies in the stores where normally you wouldn't have been able to know that they were there because the Iron V was blinding you with all of that light. That is what I would really like the night versions of these maps to try to capture when it comes to using the Iron V scopes. And so if DICE was able to add in these strengths and weaknesses to a gadget like this, I think it would be an amazing addition into the game. Not only would it add more variety to your loadouts, but it would just force you to think about combat differently depending on the customization that you decided on. I know it would be tough. I know that this would probably take a lot of work on DICE's part to make sure that the Iron V is working as it would realistically. I mean, this is how it would work in real life. You have Iron V goggles and you enter a bright room, you are going to be blinded. I'm assuming that's exactly how they function in the real world, but adding that into the maps, I'm assuming, would take a long time, but if they were able to pull the resources and add it on in, I think it would be an awesome addition into the game. The next question for today comes from Garrett, and it is, I think that they should add a try before you buy mechanic in Hardline. You'd be able to try out the gun in a shooting range to get a feel for the recoil and other attachments. This would eliminate people being unsatisfied with a gun they just saved up and bought. This is a great idea, and honestly, I'm pretty surprised that Visceral hasn't decided to add in this mechanic into Hardline. Who knows, maybe they'll surprise us. We've only played the beta and the alpha so far, and we haven't had our hands on the main game, and this might be something that they're holding close to the chest to reveal at a later date, but my gut feeling is that no, we will not have the ability to test out weapons or even have a test range to kind of try them out for a few hours, or at least for a couple of minutes to decide if this is the weapon that we want. What I love about the idea is that if I'm going to spend $150,000 on a bolt action rifle, I think that's how much it costs for one of the weapons for the professional class, It would be nice if I could, dip my toe into the pond and figure out if this is a weapon that is worth it or fits the playstyle or the role that I'm looking for before I drop that ridiculous amount of cash on a weapon. That may not sound like a lot of money for people that played the beta for hours and hours on end, but for a guy who comes home from work, he spent all day slaving away to try to bring food to the table, gets home and then drops $150,000 on a bolt-action rifle that took him weeks to accumulate, and then he realizes that that's not the weapon that he wanted, or it's just not the weapon that he was hoping that it was going to be, and he would much rather would have spent that cash on something else. That's gonna feel like a kick into the nuts. It's not game-breaking by any means, because in my opinion, this system is far superior to what we have in Battlefield 4. I love the concept of being able to pick the weapon that I want to use when I want it, if I have the money, but it would be nice if there was the ability to either test it out for a few rounds or there was a test range. I also think that this was a little bit of a missed opportunity for Visceral to fit the whole cops versus criminal theme and have a test range inside of a police station, which absolutely makes sense, or better yet, a test range that is inside of a criminal mansion. That would be amazing. I'm not sure that the reason why they didn't do it is because I've heard that the test range in Battlefield 4 wasn't used all that much from Battlefielders. If that's the case, and Visceral knew that, they may not have wanted to take the time to create these assets or create a test range in Hardline, because they knew that a lot of people weren't going to take advantage of it, and they would much rather allocate those resources or time to spend into the game that they know people are really going to enjoy. But regardless, the mechanic of being able to test them out for a couple of hours, I am 100% on board, and if they were going to add in a test range, that would just be the cherry on top. The next question for today comes from Mr. Turd Sprinkles, and it is, do you think that the breaching charge should be removed from Hotwire? It feels broken because I find myself getting blown up by these constantly, and it's nearly impossible to spot them. I would argue that to some extent, this is just one small part of what makes Hotwire in Battlefield Hardline. I will admit that it can be very frustrating to die instantaneously from a breaching charge when you had no idea it's there. Dying out of nowhere when you weren't expecting that your death was just around the corner can be very frustrating, but Visceral has made it abundantly clear that they want multiple ways to take out these vehicles so that combat is varied in this game mode. Sure, you can jump into a car and do the standard, lean out the window and shoot out the driver, or just blow it up with small arms fire. That is amazing, and honestly, that is what makes the game mode so enjoyable. But also the idea of having roadblocks, or these sections of the map where people are laying traps for the enemy, that also is a really cool concept. I think the thing that you have to remember is that if you are being very obvious, if you are driving around in a giant circle and you're not deviating from your path at all, it's going to be very easy for the enemy to predict your movement and lay a bunch of breaching charges on the ground and blow you up the next time that you revolve around in that cycle. Varying it up is a key component of the game mode, and I found that I hardly ever died from breaching charges. I don't know if this is just a PC thing and maybe on consoles it was a rampant issue. You guys can let me know down below in the comments, but I just felt like as long as I varied up where I was heading and kind of had a basic understanding of where a lot of these traps normally are on the map and avoided them, that I had no problem avoiding these frustrating deaths. And so who knows, maybe when the game launches, I will be eating my words right now and it will become a rampant issue. But at least in its current state, at least in the beta, I had no issues with it. Maybe they will nerf it in the future if it does become a rampant problem. But right now, I like the idea of having these traps being laid around the map. It makes you approach combat differently, and I think that it is a good addition into the series. The next question for today comes from Jake, and it is, what do you think of the tracking dart? It seems a little bit overpowered that it can give an RPG and the SMA the ability to lock on to mark soldiers. I love the tracer dart in Hardline. If someone is able to hit you with a tracer dart when you're playing as an infantry, running over to an RPG and then lock onto you with an RPG and take you out, I think they deserve that kill. Flat out, they 100% deserve that kill, because that combo is not gonna happen very often on the battlefield. Like, let's be honest, that's gonna be very few and far between. And really, the player that is using the tracer is being selfless. If you are using that pistol every time you get into an infantry-based combat situation, which is rampant in Hardline, the game revolves around infantry gameplay, and I love that about it, by the way. You switch on over to your pistol, all you have left is your tracer, and if you've gone through all of your rounds in your primary weapon, you are going to be, well, at a huge disadvantage, and more often than not, you're going to be having a nice little dirt nap in a couple of seconds. The tracer, though, at its core, is all about disposing of vehicles. It basically works the same way that it did back in Bad Company 2. If you want to take out a helicopter and you weren't all that great at using an RPG to snipe them out of the sky with the dumbfire mechanic, well then swapping on over to the tracer rounds and then having that combo was the best way to go about it. You're still at a disadvantage because you don't have a pistol that can really do anything if you run out of your primary rounds, but at least you have that option to take care of vehicles or lock onto vehicles when the opportunity arises. And while I do think that maybe the tracer round is a little bit too effective right now in Hardline, I think it's a little bit too easy to lock onto helicopters and vehicles. If you're getting hit by a tracer as an infantry, then you might be doing something wrong, and in my opinion, you actually deserve to be that nice bright beacon for everyone to see. And so, yeah, I guess it can be a little frustrating when you get locked on by an RPG when you are playing as an infantry, but let's be honest, that is not going to happen very often. It's more hilarious when you are able to pull off one of those maneuvers. And so overall, I am really happy with the way that they have added in the tracer, and I think it is a great addition to Hardline. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question for a future Sunday mailbox, you can do so by leaving a comment down below or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.